Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, this is At the Helm Sports. I'm your host, Derek Helm. Thank you for joining me for episode 141. Please be sure to follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave those 5-star reviews. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And in the comments section, let me know, who is your favorite late wide receiver to target? Because obviously wide receivers are much deeper than the running back position. So interesting to know who's going late in drafts and who people are targeting. We'll get there here because that's basically what we're diving into today. Is we're going to go over my wide receiver tiers for the 2024 NFL fantasy season. And joining me, we have Dave Utnick. Dave, how we doing?
Gentlemen, how are you now?
And Mike Carpanini.
Boys, how are you now?
So, yeah, obviously we went through quarterbacks and tight ends last week. The season is rapidly approaching. We will also have a new segment on the show today, but we might as well dive right into it because we went an hour and 20 minutes on quarterbacks and tight ends, and there are far more wide receivers. So my tier one, I have CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and Jamar Chase. Now, basically, I have these guys here because I think any one of the three have the best chance to finish as the wide receiver one. And just again, at the top, want to say that these are half-point PPR scoring. So I just absolutely love these three guys. Definitely like some of the other guys better, but I think these three have the best chance to finish as the wide receiver one on the season. CeeDee Lamb obviously went nuts last year. He led the league in targets and receptions, had 181 targets, 135 receptions, 1,700 yards, 12 touchdowns. In 2022, he had a pretty productive season as well, 107 for 1,359 yards and 9 touchdowns. He was the wide receiver 6. There's really just no one that is going to compete with him. Obviously, the holdout is a big deal. If it continues on because Jerry Jones is an absolute moron, then I might think about moving him down. But I do think they will get a deal done. And I absolutely love CeeDee this year. From week 8 on last year, he had nearly 100 more fantasy points than any other wide receiver, 263 points over that week stretch. And that would have been good for wide receiver 4 last year. So from week on last year, he basically was wide receiver 4. Absolutely incredible. Then we have Tyreek Hill. Obviously, Tyreek is an absolute freak. He's getting up there in age. We saw him get banged up a little bit here and there last year. So it is kind of a concern, but he's an absolute cheat code when he is on the field. He is extremely efficient. The last 4 years, he's been wide receiver 2, 2, 6, and 2. Last year, 171 targets, 119 receptions, 1,799 yards and 13 touchdowns. He is just an absolute ridiculous big play waiting to happen. Back-to-back years with 1,700 plus yards, so that's ridiculous. He had a ridiculous 32% target share, 39% targets per route run, and 4 yards per routes run. Now, 4 might not seem like a big deal, but when you think about how many routes a human being runs throughout the course of an NFL season, he was by far the highest in that metric last year. And then I have Jamar Chase. Last year was basically a throwaway with Burrow gone, but still managed to top 100 receiving or receptions for the first time in his career. 1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns with absolute scrubs throwing him the ball. So he had 1,009 in 2022, playing only 12 games. So he's been absolutely productive. Obviously had the monster rookie year. He's averaged about 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns per year. And I just think if Joe Burrow stays healthy, the sky is the limit for Jamar Chase. So, David, what do you think about that top tier there?
I mean, I think you're limiting it too much. We'll get into the next 2 guys here. Well, Jefferson and Amon-Ra, St. Brown are going to be next on this list in the tier. But I think, all 5 of them really have that shot, like you said, to finish as the number 1 wide receiver. You went through CeeDee Lamb's numbers. He was absolutely ridiculous last year. But, we're knocking Justin Jefferson out of the top tier. I understand that, there's concerns with quarterback here, but, for the amount of targets and the percentage of targets these guys get for their team, I don't disagree with any of these top 3 that you have, but I would add the other 2.
Which is fair. And I thought about that. It's just, for me, Jefferson regardless of what Mike says, Darnold, he definitely takes a step back. Obviously we saw him get there last year with absolutely terrible quarterback play, but he was kind of up and down. So I don't know if he's going to be as consistent. Obviously, he's a freak of nature, the best wide receiver in football, in my opinion. But I just think with this offense this year, with either Darnold or a rookie, he takes a little bit of his ceiling away. So that's the reason why I have him in the next tier. And then Amon-Ra, again, one of the top receivers in football, but I also worry a little bit about his ceiling just being on that offense. It's more of a run-first offense with those two running backs. And then you have Laporta, and if Jamison Williams can take a step forward, I just worry a little bit about him. But those two are still absolutely solid options. I just like the ceiling a little bit of these three, but it's paper thin. And if you wanted to lump them all together in a tier, I wouldn't mind it. Mike, what do you think of tier one?
I think it's a bigger tier too. Also, I think it's a bigger tier also. I get what you're trying to do here, but I think honestly, all three of your top tiers could all finish number one by season's end. I think an argument could be made for kind of Lamb as a tier by himself, and then the next 6 or 7 names all in tier two. But I'm just failing to see really that much of a difference here in these top 6, 8 names.
I mean, like Mike was saying, all these guys are your alpha wide receiver. I think that a couple of them are more talented than the rest that we're going to be getting into, but I'm just not ready to discount Justin Jefferson, even with the quarterback change. You saw what he did with Nick Mullins down the stretch. I don't even know who was playing quarterback for them. Was it still Nick Mullins? Yeah, it was Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs and a little bit of Jaron Hall. But once he got back from injury, he was still putting up crazy numbers at the end of the year, and he still doesn't have much competition, which, we'll find out what's going on with Addison at some point. Hawkinson's out for a while. Yeah, that might draw more attention to him, but, I still think Justin Jefferson, until he doesn't show it, he is a wide receiver one, that's for sure.
Oh, he's absolutely a wide receiver one. And as I said, I think he is the most talented wide receiver in the league. It's a little bit concerning just with this offense. Are they going to take a step back? And for me, this is basically where I'm going to draft these guys. And again, I do believe that any one of these could finish as the wide receiver one. And I'd be happy if I left a draft and any one of them were my wide receiver one. But for me, this is just basically, these are the guys that I would take with the top 3 or 4 picks. Whereas Jefferson, I'm fine with him potentially finishing as the number one, but I don't know if I had one of those top 4 picks, if I would take him over the other 3, if that makes sense. Same with Amon-Ra, which is why I put them in that second tier. I'd probably rather them around 4, 5, 6, somewhere around there. But the issue with Jefferson too was, last year he had 2 monster games. So in week 16, he had 23 points, and he finished the year in week 18, which doesn't help anybody, with 30 points. But mixed in between there, he had an 8-point game in week 17, 11 points in week 15, and 3.7 in week 14. Now, week 14, I believe, was his first game back from injury, and he still got a little banged up. So you could throw that one out. But it's just the inconsistencies scare me a little bit. And I could see it being a better season than Devontae Adams had last year, but similar to that, where you're getting huge games, you're getting great outputs, but then he disappears a little bit. And if I'm picking in the top 3, that's just, I'd like a chance at a little bit more consistency while still having the ceiling. So that's kind of my thought process there.
Yeah, like you said, I think we're just splitting hairs up top. With the number 1 pick in the draft, if I'm taking a wide receiver, I'm taking Lamb, I'm taking Tyreek Hill, and I think maybe the rest are up for the conversation. But either way, these are the elite crop of wide receivers that we are looking at. So, we can spend all night arguing as to who to put which one where, but these are your bona fide top 5 for sure.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, tier 2 is Justin Jefferson, then Amon-Ra. And then tier 3, I have A.J. Brown and Garrett Wilson. And basically, this is the end of my top first round tier. If I get any one of these guys as my wide receiver one, I am happy. And then I have a lot of guys lumped together after this. But A.J. Brown obviously broke the record for most consecutive 125-yard receiving game receiving yard games last year. So he's an absolute freak. You would think Kellen Moore in this offense, they're going to throw the ball down the field more. They should run some more motion, which they did not do at all last year. Came back to earth towards the end of the year last year, and a lot of that, I think, was due to the vanilla offense they were playing. Jalen Hurts, I believe, was a little bit banged up, but 157 targets, 106 receptions, 1,400 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He was also above that 30% target per route run metric that we like to see, 4th most air yards in the league. So love A.J. Brown. And then Garrett Wilson, I mean, honestly, the fact that he topped 1,000 yards last year in this offense might be one of the greatest accomplishments by a wide receiver last year. I mean, it was absolutely putrid what he was playing with week in and week out, and still managed to be pretty productive. Now, touchdowns have been an issue. He's only had 3 and 4 his first 2 seasons, but obviously with even slightly more competent quarterback play, those numbers should increase. He had 169 targets last year. So, Mike, 169 targets. How many targets inside the 10-yard line do you think he had?
7.
2.
Yeah.
2.
The offense scored 18 total touchdowns last year.
Yep.
In 17 games, the offense scored 18 touchdowns. So, like, we could reasonably expect that team total to conservatively double, aggressively triple. I'm going to think a lot of those are going to go to Garrett Wilson. I think the second team is massive right now, and Garrett Wilson is probably the 3rd receiver off my board.
I could see him finishing that high. I don't know if I'm taking him that high.
I mean, he said
I've
Mike's
already
board.
taken him that high.
Yeah, I mean, we're not talking about a reasonable board. We're talking about Mike's board. So, the fact that he's down at 3 tells you at least what he thinks about the other 2 guys there. So,
actually, you guys probably wouldn't like my 2.
So the other thing is with Aaron Rodgers, we know that throughout his career, it hurt Aaron Jones's rushing touchdown upside because Rodgers loves throwing when he gets down towards the end zone. So that absolutely should increase Garrett Wilson's red zone looks and especially targets inside the 10, where he should have more than 2 of them this year. So that's basically the top 3 tiers there. I think I'd be happy with any one of them in the first round. You can make a case that maybe some of these other guys should be up there, but I just think that's where I kind of draw the line for the first round there. Is there anyone you guys think should sneak up in the first round, or do you think a lot of these guys are lumped in as maybe right at the turn or second round picks?
Yeah, I mean, I think you caught the guys that are in a reach in the first round. You might have your preferences. Might want to take Garrett Wilson 2nd overall in a PPR draft, but this is your chalk wide receiver in the first round for sure.
All right,
yeah.
So
I
we're
agree
gonna
with this top 8.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, you can debate who should go ahead of who, but I think it's pretty clear cut here with who should be going in that first round. So we're going to introduce the new segment here. So we've got a new segment for the show. It's called Making Waves. We have Waverly Williams joining us, and he's going to be breaking down basically who he likes for the 2024 NFL season and who he's fading. So, Wave, what do you got for us?
Brian Thomas Jr. on the Jaguars, 6'3", 215, 4.3 speed. He's locked in as a starter. The preseason game, him and Cook were the wide receivers in two wide sets, and that Kirk was not. So I'm expecting him from a day one to be a starter. He had 17 TDs in college last year, led the nation, playing with Malik Neighbors. So he knows. I mean, you can get 17 touchdowns with Malik Neighbors, like you can play. So he has a great QB. He has high draft capital, first round pick. I'm expecting from day one a special rookie season from Thomas. My next wide receiver is Christian Watson. A lot of people down on him for his past injuries, but he saw a doctor. He put in a couple $1 million into looking into his hamstring issues. They found out that one hamstring was 20% larger than the other, so they've been working on strengthening the other. He hasn't really been hurt this whole training camp. He had like a little minor. He fell the other day, but he was able to practice the next day. So his main thing is health. He had 9 TDs as a rookie. He's big and explosive. He's got a great QB. They're in a great offense. If he stays healthy, so when he played, he was their leader in red zone percentage. And in preseason, he started with him, Reed, and Dobbs were in the 3 set started, and Wicks came off behind them. So if he stays on the field, I love Christian Watson this year, especially where he's going. But I do have one more receiver I like. I did kind of mention him before, but that is Malik Neighbors. He's on the Giants. They pretty much have no running back, no other receivers. He is gonna get peppered. And this dude, he 4.4 speed, huge college season, and he's big enough at 6 feet, so it's not like he's a really small guy. And he reminds me of a faster Odell Beckham Jr. That's my comp for Malik Neighbors. I think he's just gonna day 1, 10 targets. I think he's just gonna have a monster year.
Yeah, I mean, he's been balling out so far in camp. I mean, he definitely could be a monster. I guess the biggest question is Daniel Jones in that offense, but I think if he can stay healthy, he's absolutely an alpha in this league for probably quite some time to come.
Yeah, he gets crazy separation. I think even Daniel Jones can hit him when he gets that much separation.
You got any wide receivers that you're trying to stay away from this year?
It's a big name, so it's a little hot take, but Puka Nacua, last year, great. He came on the scene, he destroyed, but they didn't have Cooper Kupp for most of the season. Cooper Kupp, he's a couple years removed from one of the best receivers seasons ever. So I know Stafford likes him. Puka Nacua, a lot of his season he was the number one target. He got all the targets and he was not the same player when he played with when Kupp came back. So Puka Nacua, and he's already hurt. I mean, I know they said. I mean, they think he's going to play week 1, but with injuries, you never know. What if he tweaks it again, and then now he's out week 1 or 2? So that's I'm staying away from Puka this year.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that one, actually. And it pissed me off that he actually got hurt, because now he's going to dip down, because where he was going, I wanted no part of him there. So It kind of pissed me off that he got hurt, because now it's actually helping out the people that want Puka. All right, Wave. Well, that was good. Now we got a good idea of where you're going and where you're not for the season. And obviously we'll bring you back periodically, get some DraftKings takes, get some week-to-week takes, because we got the new segment, Making Waves. So thanks for joining, Wave.
No doubt, man. Let's get this money out here, boy.
So, Making Waves. Mike, the floor is yours. What do you think about?
Are people actually down on Christian Watson? I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah. I mean,
really? Okay. I'm not, so I don't hate that. That's fine. Whatever. Really going out on him there with Neighbors. He would have been the top receiver off the board in any other draft that didn't have Marvin Harrison Jr. So, really reaching there. I think he's downplaying the Jaguars' offense. I think they've got more weapons than just that. I think Christian Kirk is a really talented receiver. We tight ends the other day, and Evan Ingram remembered how to play football. They still got ETN in the back. I don't think it's impossible that he has an okay season for a rookie. I don't think I'm going that hard at him. And then Puka, you said I don't necessarily hate that one either. Kupp is old and white, so I can see the not moving away, but his volume's going to decrease over time. Like Jordy Nelson pops in my head. So,
well, Puka was a fade, so
yeah, that's what I mean. Oh, well, yeah, okay, yeah, I got that backwards. I thought we were fading Kupp. Okay. Yeah.
Hey,
No, I
what about
disagree.
you? You got any reactions to the making waves segment?
Yeah, I mean, I was taking notes here too because there was a lot to take in from that here. Let's start with Christian Watson. Guy hasn't stayed healthy ever. Spent millions of dollars on his hamstrings, and apparently he's running differently so he doesn't hurt them anymore.
He saw a doctor.
The doctor told him to run differently, and that cost him millions of dollars. Listen, injury-prone players are injury-prone for a reason. They continue to get hurt all the time. So while he might be one of the more talented wide receivers that they have, it's a big group. And as soon as he goes down, I mean, at this time, he's going to lose his job. So if he does get injured, that's where Dubs and Reed and who else am I missing here? Wicks and even Bo Melton, they've got a really deep group of wide receivers where, if Watson really can't stay healthy, they're going to stop playing this game with him. So not high on Christian Watson at all. Brian Thomas Jr. is another one of Wave's big, fast guys with lots of bias. He's going to be a good player, but they've got a lot of talented players around him. Kirk, you're high on Ingram. I'm not, but he's still going to be down in the pecking order here, and ETN is a legitimate, threat in that offense. So we'll see what happens with Brian Thomas. Puka we'll get into in a minute. He's in that tier for me of gross clicks that are just way too high. There's another player who I would put in that same group, Drake London. Like, in theory, they should be good. Do you want to click them as high as you want to? Not really. And, I mean, I'm a Giants fan. Malik Neighbors is going to be awesome, and the more that Wave keeps touting him up, the more likely he's going to get hurt in fucking training camp like he did the other day. So this is the life that I live as a Giants fan. He looks like the most talented wide receiver that I've seen in Giants blue, probably ever. But he's just got to stay healthy, and whether it's Daniel Jones or another quarterback, I mean, he's going to be a star in this league for years to come for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, we will have plenty of Wave coming back throughout the season. But if we dive back into the tiers, tier 4, I have a pretty big one. We have Devontae Adams, Marvin Harrison, Puka Nacua, Chris Olave, Nico Collins, and Deebo Samuel. Now here, this is, like I said, this is basically the guys that I would take at the turn if everybody was gone. And basically in the second round, Devontae was extremely inconsistent, as I said before. I mean, he had 5 games with less than 10 points, 5 games with over 15 points. So it was hit or miss last year. He was still a target monster, 176 targets. Terrible quarterback play. Got to root for Minshew there for him to have any production this year. So I do think it's possible. If I did get one of those guys in the first round and Devontae fell and he was my second wide receiver, I'd probably really like that. But otherwise, we have Marvin Harrison, obviously one of the best prospects coming out of college in quite some time. Back-to-back seasons of 1,200 yards and 14 touchdowns at Ohio State, averaged 18.1 yards per reception. He is a freak. He is definitely going to command a lot of targets, but how early do you want to take him? We brought up Puka Nacua, historic rookie season, but I do think that if Cooper Kupp is healthy, it definitely takes away from him. A lot of his big games were without Kupp in the lineup last year. Now, he still was productive with Kupp there, but kind of limited the ceiling a bit. And just with how high he's been going, I don't think I'll have many teams with him on it. Chris Olave, very talented, but really hasn't hit his ceiling yet. Carr is kind of limiting that upside in the touchdown department, but he's had back-to-back years of 1,000-plus yards and should be getting a good amount of targets. Nico Collins is actually a guy I'm rising on a little bit here. I do think that a lot of it was efficiency last year, and his targets could come down a little bit with Diggs there, but I do think he actually has the upside to be a top 10 wide receiver, but the Tank and Diggs there, maybe it's not this year. Last year, 80 receptions, 1,297, and 8 touchdowns. A huge leap for him after doing literally nothing the first 2 years. But even if the target share does go down, I do think that his efficiency numbers are pretty good. 28% targets per route run, 3.3 yards per route run, which was second highest to only Tyreek last year. So I like some Nico Collins. And then we know what Deebo is. He's also a boomer bust guy, but he can give you those huge ceiling games. And obviously, if McCaffrey gets banged up, he's going to get a good amount of rushing work. If Ayuk gets shipped out, then I'm probably moving Debo possibly all the way up to that tier with Wilson and Brown. But Mike, what are you thinking here in tier 2 or tier 4? Sorry.
Yeah, I think Dave nailed it with that scary click comment, because a lot of these are scary clicks. Like, it really depends where this tier starts landing. This tier was landing at the top end of the second round. Like, this feels fucking gross. But if you're getting it, bottom 2, top 3, like, all of a sudden these names feel a little bit better. Adams, I'm just a fan, always have been, going back, and, he's still really good at football. Like, and I think we're all rooting for Minshew. I think that makes him viable again. He's the one name here I might be kind of, intrigued to kind of click it earlier than I want to. Debo, like you said, that trade goes through. But I just think we can, when it's all said and done, I think we're going to be able to approximate this value a round or two later with different guys.
Dave, so, I mean, you said it. Risky clicks here. Well, what are you thinking in this tier?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be. I mean, this is why prioritizing wide receiver versus running back, this year over some others is going to be really important, because none of this really seems comfortable. I like Devontae Adams. I was actually really surprised with the numbers that he put up last year. I thought he had a down year. He still had 1,100 yards receiving, so pretty quiet in terms of 1,100 yards. Might have been all in one place. A couple of games that really got him there, but I'm hoping that we get Gardner Minshew there and we get a little bit of a bounce back. Debo, I like in this tier. I like your tier overall here. Puka, like I said, I kind of want to just push him aside into its own thing. I mean, he's better than all of these wide receivers around here, especially with the potential. But how much Cup eats into it? How good are the Rams going to be? I mean, all of this stuff is a little uncomfortable. I'm okay with Nico. I would say Tank Dell is more of a threat than Stephon Diggs, so I'm getting a little bit lower on. But, Debo's gonna have a lot to do with what happens with the trade here. But I don't really disagree with anyone else that you have in this tier. I would throw Drake London up in this tier and then put him aside into him and Puka into their own separate ones. Drake London has, similarly to Marvin Harrison, they have the pedigree. They've never shown it. And you're asking for a second round pick here. None of that feels comfortable or right at all. But, based on the opportunity and the talent level, both should be, borderline wide receiver ones.
Yeah, I like Drake London coming out of college. It's just, tier 5, I have Cooper Kupp, Drake London, DK Metcalf, Mike Evans, Devontae Smith, Stephon Diggs, and Jalen Waddle. So with London, for me, it's just, we haven't seen it yet. And with Kirk Cousins, I mean, we have Garrett Wilson up there, but I do think that he's slightly higher caliber wide receiver than London is. With Kirk Cousins coming back from the Achilles, and he got it even later than Rodgers did, that there's no guarantee that he's going to come back and be 100% too. And just part of this too for me is how high London is going. So I kind of bumped him down a little bit just because I know that, these tiers are where I'm going to draft guys, and this is where I would draft him. I would not draft him where he's currently going. Now, could he finish well above this? Sure. But I'm a little bit worried about the upside. And I do think on a week-to-week basis, this offense could go through different guys. It could be Kyle Pitts one week. We could see a Darnell Mooney week, or we could just see it's just straight Bijan. So that's part of the reason why I bumped him down to this tier. Cooper Kupp, I actually do like quite a bit. I mean, if he can be healthy, I hate to quote Wave, but the guy put up a historic season as a wide receiver, and I don't think he's that far removed from it. So I like Cooper Kupp quite a bit. We know he's still going to get a huge target share when he is on the field. And then a guy I've been rising on quite a bit is DK Metcalf. I do think that the Seattle offense is going to be rather improved in the offensive play calling standpoint with Ryan Grubb as their offensive coordinator. I think coming from Washington, he's going to have them running a lot more motion. It's going to be a wide open offense. And I do think DK Metcalf is going to play that Rome Odunze role. And I could see a huge year coming for DK. So I'm rising on him quite a bit. And I'm actually going to be targeting him quite a bit in some drafts. So I do like that. Mike Evans is just Mike Evans. He's solid. You know what you're going to get every single year. Now, granted, he's a little bit older, but I'm fine with him here. Devontae Smith, again, with Kellen Moore, I do think that they run a lot more motion. He gets open a lot easier, and I think there is a world where he could potentially even finish above A.J. Brown. Now, obviously, you would rather A.J. Brown and the upside he has there, but Devontae Smith is a very talented wide receiver. So if I could get him on my team, I would definitely be pretty happy. Jalen Waddle I have here as well, just an incredible offense. They know how to get their guys in space, so definitely like him. The issue with him is just always banged up here and there, so don't really like that. And then by far the hardest guy I have ranking is Stephon Diggs. It's just so difficult to know where to put him this year. In this offense, obviously, he should be good with CJ Stroud. It's just a matter of what's the target share going to be. Is Nico going to take away from him? Is Tank Dell going to take away from him? But they did go out and make an effort to get Diggs. And we know that if he's not getting the ball, he's going to let him know. We already saw him basically yelling at Stroud in the first preseason game, and they were barely even playing. So I do think he's going to command targets, and it's all a question of whether he's totally washed or if he's still Stephon Diggs. Now, obviously, last year on the Bills, he completely disappeared after Joe Brady took over. Now, part of that might have been by design. And once they went to a little bit more run-heavy, power-run offense and he wasn't getting the looks, I think he just became completely disinterested. So I still think Diggs has a little bit left in the tank, and he could actually flash in this offense. Now, I don't know if it's going to be what he was in Buffalo, but
he can't really afford to throw hissy fits on the field, though, without getting blocked. They don't need him. Yeah, they went out and got him, but they also converted his contract into a one-year deal. You know, I feel like it was almost a luxury pickup that maybe they recapture something, or if they don't, then who cares? We still have Tank and Nico and, you know, plenty of weapons around them. So, like you said, you know, Stephon Diggs is a really tough rank for me just because I like what Tank Dell did when he was, you know, the primary target with him and Nico on the field. I like what Nico did when Tank Dell went down. Adding Diggs to this offense, and like you said, you saw it already. They didn't even make it through a full preseason game. They're starting to argue with each other on the sidelines. So how much patience that Houston has with a player like that, how much of the diva of Stephon Diggs actually comes out. I mean, we are talking now high draft picks. This is a one with, you know, huge up. I don't even know if there's huge upside, but the downside on it is way greater than the risk in terms of taking the pick here. Missing from your tiers, Brandon Ayuk, also another guy with a big asterisk next to his name until we figure out where he's going to be. And this is where I would start putting Malik Neighbors also. Granted that he's healthy, there's no reason why he shouldn't perform as well or outperform anyone else in this tier.
Yeah, and just with Diggs, I mean, I love Tank Dell. I think he's a very, very talented wide receiver. But the fact of the matter is they ran 3 wide receiver sets, 11 personnel in only, it was under 60%. So a lot of times they're running 2 tight ends and just 2 wide receivers. So Tank Dell's not going to be on the field anywhere near as much as Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs are. So just that alone, I mean, the snap share alone bumps Diggs over Dell for me, and in what should be a very talented offense.
Doesn't that change with the personnel? I mean, their third wide receiver last year was Noah Brown. This is a different
and Noah Brown was playing in 2 wide receiver sets over Tank Dell last year.
Okay, I'll believe you. I don't necessarily have any data to back it up, but I'll believe you there.
There were absolutely times where Tank Dell was on the field, and you're right. He will be at times, and a lot of it is probably dependent on what the play call is. But
and he's extremely
Diggs and Nico
too.
will. Diggs and Nico will be the primary wide receivers in 2 wide sets. Mike, how you feeling about this tier?
I think this is just a super risky tier. I think there's, good
Absolutely.
chance that a lot of these guys can kind of, push themselves up the ranking. Like Cup can refine form. Mike Evans scores an absolute ton of touchdowns, even if he's not catching a ton of balls. I don't have faith in Diggs, but there is a world where, he does go there and just reestablish that he's an alpha. So there's a lot of, potential situations that these could all be really good spots, but there's also potential for disaster in almost all of these picks. And like I said with the last year, I think you can approximate value, a little bit further down. Dave mentioned Ayuk. I've always been a huge Amari Cooper fan. We covered Neighbors, a little while ago. Like, I think those are a little bit, I don't want to say safe, but safer that, if I can get them a round or two later, like for the same for the same expected value at the end of the season, like that's probably where we're gonna lean.
Yeah, and really for me, I mean, I'm thinking about, honestly, by the time I'm drafting, DK Metcalf might be in the next tier up, because I do think that he is safe, and I do think that he has a little bit more upside than some of these guys here in this range. And then you could lump together the next tier and these guys. But just for me, I think in this range, and Dave, you touched on it before, it's why wide receivers are going the way they are in the first round. It's just, there's so many questions with all these other guys, and they are extremely risky. So if you want to take one of these guys, I think you have to have one of those top guys in the first round. Maybe you go running back in the second, and then when you're coming back in the third, you can take a chance on one of these guys. And I just think that they have a little bit higher upside than the next tier, which is tier 6, which is Brandon Ayuk, DJ Moore, Amari Cooper, and Malik Neighbors. Now, Ayuk, obviously, up in the air. We still don't know exactly what's going to go on there. I said it last week on the quarterback show. I still think there is a very high chance that he ends up staying with the Niners. And if that's the case, you definitely make a case to bump him probably all the way up to the top of tier 5. So I do like Ayuk if he is in that Niners offense. If he's on the Steelers, kind of have him here, might even bump him down a little bit. DJ Moore is a very talented wide receiver. We have said it. I know I've said it on this exact show 3 years in a row. Just, this is the best quarterback he's ever played with. This is the best quarterback. Well, again, this is the best quarterback he's ever played with. Now, the problem is you have 2 other very good wide receivers that could demand target shares, but I do think that DJ Moore is an alpha wide receiver, and he can turn a lot of fantasy points into a little bit of. I do like him here. Mike, you touched on Amari Cooper. I mean, he is clearly the number 1 there. Elijah Moore and Judy will be nice little pieces to that offense, but I don't think that they are coming for Amari Cooper's number 1 wide receiver job on that team whatsoever. So do like him there. And then Dave, Malik Neighbors, I mean, I absolutely love the guy. It's just a matter of, can Daniel Jones get him the ball, and how good is this offense going to be? How many opportunities is he really going to have? I think that if those questions were a little bit more solidified, I'd move him up, because I believe as a talent, he is absolutely a freak and going to be an incredible wide receiver that we are possibly even talking about as a tier 1 as soon as next year.
I mean, if you want to move him up right now, just replace everything you just said about DJ Moore and replace it with Neighbors. He's got a shitty quarterback. We all agree on that. It hasn't stopped a lot of these alpha wide receivers from putting up real numbers. And his complementing pieces are fine. Wendell Robinson is a nice player. Jalen Hyatt is a nice player. So is Darius Slayton. But there isn't much else there. I know Wave really discredited Devin Singletary in that offense, who I think will actually play a nice role and will be pretty productive. But when you're talking about elite playmakers and a quarterback that's fighting for his life in the NFL, you might see a lot of that old school Aaron Rodgers where, just chuck it to Neighbors and let him do something. So I think his upside is way bigger than anyone else in this tier.
Yeah, but the issue is, I mean, Daniel Jones has thrown over 20 touchdowns once in his career. So
yeah, without anybody there. And he did it without a beard. He threw 20 touchdowns without a beard. He's got a beard now.
This is true. I forgot to take in the beard factor. Yeah, I love Neighbors as a talent. I just believe in his rookie year, the ceiling is a little bit capped. I do still think he could finish as a top 15 wide receiver. Absolutely. It's just, and in this range, I don't think you really need much more than that. But Mike, go ahead. Amari Cooper.
I mean, he's the number one there. He piles up. No, he's steady. Like he'll give you a follow-up game. He had that, what was it, 4 touchdown, 265 yards or whatever it was. But his, I can't say his floor. He does disappear at times, but I don't care. I love me some Amari Cooper. Like I'll just take that he's going to win you some games and he's going to lose you some games. But I'm totally good here. Obviously, the name I want this tier. If Dave is allowed to take Neighbors because DJ has a beard, I'm allowed to put T. Higgins in this tier because Joe Burrow is blonde now.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I have T. Higgins right at the top of the very next tier, so I don't mind it. But what do you think about some of these other guys in the tier?
I like Moore as a player. I'm just, and I've been saying this for a year, like I'm not sold on Caleb Williams. I think there is just massive bust potential there. So, I don't think Justin Fields was a bad quarter. Like, didn't play great. That offense was a joke. But, to say that Caleb Williams is the best quarterback DJ Moore has ever played with, I'm not sure if that's really true or if we could fairly make that assessment yet. So I think DJ Moore is interesting, but I'm not gonna. I just don't want the quarterback there.
Fair enough. So tier 7, we touched on it. I have T. Higgins, Tank Dell, Michael Pittman, George Pickens, Calvin Ridley, and Christian Kirk. T. Higgins, I mean, it's a matter of health with him as well, a matter of health with Burrow. But if this team stays healthy, we can absolutely see them go nuts. I mean, Higgins was extremely productive when he was on the field and healthy in the previous season. So I do like him. He's not going to get the target share that Chase gets, but Chase gets so much of the defensive coverage that it allows Higgins to do a lot. And I do think he's a very talented wide receiver. So love Higgins there. Tank Dell, I mean, obviously a very talented wide receiver. We already saw him score a long touchdown in the preseason. Granted, it's preseason, but saw it time and time again last year. He is an absolute freak. And, I said he's not going to be on the field for a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, but when he is on the field, he is very, very efficient. I'm not going to compare him to Tyreek Hill, but just he has that big play upside on unlimited touches in kind of the same vein. So Michael Pittman, I've never really been a huge fan of, but I mean, Gardner Minshew allowed him to be a top 15 wide receiver last year. He's clearly the number 1 on that team. Richardson is a big question mark in the passing department, but he should still command a pretty high target share. So don't mind that. Pickens is, I definitely think he's going to have some boom games, some bust games. He'll be pretty good here and there. And part of this is a little bit of worry that maybe Ayuk does go there also. So I kind of have him a little bit lower. Maybe you can make a case with no one else on the team that he should be in a higher tier, and I'd be willing to hear that. And then I have Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk basically back-to-back here. Obviously, they were teammates last year. I do think that Ridley has a little bit of upside with Will Levis, and I do think that offense should definitely be improved from what they have been. Hopkins is a little bit older, already a little bit banged up, so Ridley could be the one there. And we did see Hopkins have some really good games last year with Will Levis, so Ridley could be the beneficiary of that. Christian Kirk, I like quite a bit for basically the same reason why I said I like Evan Ingram this year. The 2 guys that they brought in Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis are deep threats. They're going to run down the field. They're going to run wind sprints. And Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk are just going to be safety blankets right in the middle of the field. And Kirk should see a ton of targets. And really where he's going in drafts, I think if he basically just does what he did last year, you're going to be very, very happy with it. So Mike, what do you think about this tier?
These are all the guys that I would be targeting if I skipped over your last couple of tiers, saying that I can get value later. I already mentioned Higgins. I am a huge Tank Dell fan. I think sky is the limit if he can just stay healthy. At 1 year, we'll see if that's injury pro or just a fluke thing. Christian Kirk is the exact opposite of Amari Cooper. His floor, he's always living around 10, 12-ish points. And, if that's your wide receiver three's floor, 2 or 3, 2, whatever, you can live with that. He's not going to ghost you on those games. He's always getting something. And then, ceiling is not going to be as high just because of that offense, but, super safe down in this range. This is where I'm going to be living if I skip, wide receiver 1, first round, maybe skip out a couple there. And then if you could hammer 2, 3, maybe 4 of these guys from, the tier above this tier below this, I think you can round out a receiver core.
Yeah, I really like Kirk quite a bit as a value. I mean, you don't have to spend a high draft pick on him. Had a 20% target share last year. I don't see that coming down much. 24% targets per route run. A wide receiver in this range of the draft, I think that's a very good number. So definitely like him. But Dave, what are you thinking here?
Where's Rashee Rice?
Jail?
Rashee Rice I have
Not
in
yet.
the next tier because of basically just I don't think he's going to get suspended now, so I probably will move him up, but he'll be in the next tier for me.
I would say you could even bump him up a tier. It's all pending suspension, but all's been really quiet on that front. And
I actually saw today the charges haven't even been filed yet, so he's
we might be
there's
looking
probably
at
no suspension coming till next year. So I definitely he's probably going to be moved up quite a bit,
especially with the injury to Hollywood Brown.
That's a big factor.
He is a huge value, especially if you have been in the best ball streets at all. If he doesn't get suspended, huge value in Rashee Rice. I agree with Mike. T. Higgins, you can bump up another tier. I already talked about how high I am on Tank Dell. Michael Pittman, like you said, put up all those numbers with Gardner Minshew. I'm not saying Anthony Richardson can't do it, but now he's got some competition around him with A.D. Mitchell. So I don't know exactly if, how confident I am in Pittman there. Pickens, I think you're just dealing with too much volatility. Same thing with Ridley. I don't want to invest in bad offenses when we're talking about high-end wide receivers. I think both of those are bad offenses, and the injury to Hopkins, I think, actually hurts Ridley more than it helps him just in terms of the coverage. Ridley's not an alpha wide receiver, and if he's getting double covered, he's not going to win out there. And I'm with you guys on Christian Kirk. I think he's a really underrated player. In general, he's going to get a lot of targets there, especially out of the slot. So I do like all those guys that you have here. And I'd probably bump up Zay Flowers. He's another guy that I'm pretty high on this year. I think he's ready to make that leap. We talked about him a little bit on the last show, so we can move along.
Yeah, tier 8, I have Rashee Rice, Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen, Zay Flowers, Jaden Reed, and Deontay Johnson. Terry McLaurin is just, he's a solid wide receiver. And the fact that he's playing with a rookie, part of the reason why I have him down here, just really hasn't really done much in the touchdown department. With a rookie quarterback, I don't really see that changing, but he's basically a perennial 1,000-yard guy. So definitely like him. Think he's a value down here. Keenan Allen, getting a little bit older, been dealing with injuries, rookie quarterback. What's the target share going to look like? But I mean, if you're in this range and you're looking at the talent, I'm fine with it. Zay Flowers, I'm not completely sold on. I do think he will take a bit of a step forward, but how much of a step is that really going to be? Just, I mean, last year we saw it. Todd Monken came in and he wanted to spread this offense out. They wanted to throw outside, and Lamar Jackson just does not throw outside the numbers. He never has. It's part of the reason why Mark Andrews has ever even been a thing. And basically through, I think it was the first 6 games, Todd Monken actually realized it. So credit to him, and they started throwing the ball back up the seam. So I just don't think – I think even if they had drafted Malik Neighbors, I don't think that a wide receiver is compatible with Lamar Jackson to really take that huge of a step in fantasy. Will he have good weeks? Absolutely. Will he be a good value where he's going in drafts? Absolutely. Just from a fantasy standpoint, I don't know how much upside there is there. And then Jaden Reed is definitely, I believe, the most talented of the wide receivers in Green Bay. Obviously, when he was on the field last year, they used him in a number of different ways, similar to Debo. He got some rushing attempts inside the 10-yard line. Smaller guy, though, could get banged up. So it's just a little bit concerning there. And honestly, you could see Dobbs or Wicks outscoring him this year. So I just think from an upside standpoint, he belongs here, and those other guys maybe a little bit further down on the team. And then Deontay Johnson, just a solid route runner. You know he's going to get open, and if anybody can fix Baker, it's the quarter. Or I mean, why am I blanking on his name now?
Bryce Young.
Yeah, there you go. That's how terrible he is. Bryce Young. I mean, they have the quarterback whisperer now. You know, he brought Baker back from the dead, brought Geno back from the dead. So I think Deontay definitely helps in Bryce Young's second year. So you can make a case that he's clearly the wide receiver one there, and he should get a good amount of targets. But Dave, what are you thinking in this area?
I think you're missing a couple of names that I would have here. Chris Godwin also comes to mind. I think he's going to play a lot more out of the slot this year. Just consistent, reliable, very similar to Mike Evans. You know what you're going to get from Godwin. Godwin, I'm not looking at his fantasy numbers at the moment, but had a pretty solid year and didn't score any touchdowns. You'd think he'd regress back to the mean this year and get in the end zone a little bit more. So really like his upside here. Roma Dunze, Xavier Worthy, and Brian Thomas. I think this is where you start putting these guys into the conversation of the upside and, you know, the breakout potential. And it might be a little tough to stomach the first couple of weeks. So just watch how you draft and make sure you have guys that'll balance out the early and back half of the year, because it might take a couple of weeks for these guys to get going. But you've got high draft capital invested in all these guys from their teams. They will eventually get there. And especially a guy like Roma Dunze, you know, you've got some elite talent in terms of, you know, the 9th overall pick in the draft here. So I don't think they drafted him just to redshirt him this year. I think he's going to be on the field in 3 wide receiver sets a lot. And you never know. I mean, with a rookie quarterback, it's all going to be about the wide receiver they have a connection with. And Roma Dunze could be exactly that wide receiver. So I would add some names to this list. I don't really hate any of the names that you have on here. Jaden Reed is just not for me for the same reasons why we talked about Watson. If you really want to spin the wheel and figure out who's going to lead the team in, you know, receptions and yardage for the Packers, go right ahead. For the draft capital you're going to need to invest to do so, I'll let you guys make those decisions, and I'll go draft elsewhere.
Yeah, I like the Godwin call. I definitely think that you can make a case for him being up here. Probably very similar profile to what Deontay Johnson has this year, but possibly in a better offense. He had 83 catches for 1,024 yards last year, only 2 touchdowns. So that was kind of the issue with Godwin there. But you would think that number would probably come up. I mean, even if he scores 5 touchdowns this year, you would be happy with that in this range. And then just to touch on Zay Flowers again, I mean, he did have a 24% target share last year, but only turned it into 77 catches for 858 yards. Obviously, in year 2, you would think he would be a little bit more productive, but I don't know. I just worry about the upside in this offense. Speaking of upside, I do think Roma Dunze has a lot, but probably more so for his career. It's very crowded there as far as target share goes. I think he's probably a better best ball DraftKings play. And then also where you can draft him is a little bit later than where some of these guys are going here. So that's part of the reason why I kind of left him in the later segment. But speaking of the later segment, Dave, I know you just said a couple. Mike, who are you targeting a little bit later in drafts or even just a little bit further down from here?
I mean, a couple of names. Keon Coleman and Curtis Samuel, both in Buffalo. Somebody's got to catch balls there. I've already said that I think Josh Allen is going to have a, pretty good year. Like I have him up there somewhere around quarterback 1. So I think both of those, at minimum, one of those has to pop off, but I think there's a chance for both of them. I think Jordan Addison is super interesting, a little bit lower down. I agree with the, take a stand on one of the Green Bay wide receivers, whether it's Watson or Reed or Wicks or whatever. Just take a stand on one of them. I don't know if I want to get invested in all three, but at some point I'm going to have to target one of them. And then just one, maybe a post-type sleeper, but probably not Jameson Williams. That was a lot of talent coming out of college, and he's done practically fucking nothing. So, I don't think it's impossible. It's just one of those if you want to throw a dart.
I mean, he's the most hyped up sleeper of the summer, so that fits right in for you there, Mike.
Is he really?
Yeah, everyone's
like
waiting
people
for
are on Williams.
Yeah, for all the reasons you just said.
Oh, damn.
And Addison actually sounds like he's going to get suspended before Rice, so there's that.
Yeah, it looks that way.
Yeah,
and it could be right before the fantasy playoffs.
Mm-hmm. He got caught
speeding.
He
can't act right either?
No, can't. Likes to drive his cars really fast and, keeps having dogs with issues that make him need to drive 200 miles an hour in his sports car.
Not great.
Yeah, some other guys I like here, Jackson Smith and Jigba. As I said, I like DK Metcalf because of Grubb as the offensive coordinator. I do think that, we're talking about Flowers making a step forward. JSN was considered the best wide receiver in the class last year. So people forget that he hurt his wrist and came into the year injured. And basically the last 3 games at least, he was the wide receiver 1 for this team last year. So I do think there is some upside there with him. And then, it's picking and choosing here as we get a little bit further down. Somebody's going to have to produce for the Chargers. I know they're going to be a little bit more run heavy, but it's the NFL in 2024. You can't run the ball every single down. It's somebody for this offense is going to be productive. So take your pick, I guess. Any one of them is as good a guess. Ladd McConkey, probably your best bet. Just he is a rookie, though. Didn't really have a good statistical profile coming out of college. Palmer is what Palmer is. I think he's a solid wide receiver. He could be productive. He's been productive when Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are out. And Quentin Johnston, I pretty much lit that draft on fire with Dynasty, but who knows? He could be an integral part of this offense. And then if we get that, go ahead.
Just to touch on Palmer, I was talking about if you wanted to draft some of these higher risk rookies later, Josh Palmer is a great guy to have on your team for consistency until, some of these rookies break out. You know what you're getting out of Josh Palmer. He's not very talented, but he's going to rack up targets, whatever they throw to them. So he's a nice, safe player. Jacoby Myers comes to mind in certain terms of some of that,
I think Romeo Doubs actually fits that profile for Green Bay as well. He's not the most talented guy on that roster by far, but he does everything well and he's going to be solid.
Yeah, they have predictable floors, all those guys.
Yep. Now, if you're looking for ceiling, some guys that I kind of like late are Rashid Shaheed. We saw flashes from him. It's basically Olave and nobody else there. So definitely like him. Darnell Mooney, obviously if Fitz was here, he would say if Rondell Moore was healthy, this would have been his opportunity, but there's basically nobody behind London and Pitts. So Mooney could definitely have some worth. And speaking of worth, Xavier Worthy, one of the fastest football players to ever live. So I don't know. You have Patrick Mahomes throwing you the ball. It's definitely worth a chance. And then someone that I think is criminally underdrafted is Cortland Sutton. Now, we don't know who's going to be throwing him the ball, but it's still a Sean Payton offense, and he is clearly the wide receiver 1 there. So I think if you're late and starving for wide receiver helps, Cortland Sutton helps quite a bit. Basically had double-digit touchdowns last year. I don't think he has that, but I do think he is a talented wide receiver.
Zach Wilson went 10 for 13 with no interceptions the other day.
Never mind. Cortland Sutton, first round.
Yeah. Especially if Zach Wilson is their quarterback, which I don't think is under any realm of possibility. Bo Nix looked competent enough where they just have to give him the job. But there's, It's upside. It's investing in an offense that isn't very good. The only other name around this list that I think you're missing that we haven't heard from Mike on is Mike Williams.
I was waiting.
I got really mad that I forgot about Mike Williams, and then when Bill mentioned him, it's a non-zero chance Mike Williams goes for double-digit touchdowns this year.
It's absolutely in the realm of possibilities. As I said, Rodgers loves to throw the ball when they get in close, and Mike Williams is definitely a big red zone target. So
yeah, he's just got to learn how to land after jumping, and he'll make it through 17 games. But every time he lands on, his shoulder, he ends up out for another 6 weeks.
And my other concern,
I think Milwaukee is playable.
Yeah, I think he's going to have a role right off the bat, and that's Malachi Corley for those not following along.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, he's very raw, so he may come along a little bit slowly. You might just want to stash him on the back of your roster and just, and especially if Williams ends up getting hurt, they're going to have to rely on guys. So I think as the season goes on, he'll get a little bit more comfortable. And the issue with all of these wide receivers outside of Garrett Wilson is Aaron Rodgers is a fucking Nazi. I mean, if you are not where he wants you to be, you're not going to be on the field. And that's one of my concerns too for Mike Williams is he's not the best route runner. They run a read and react offense where basically the wide receivers are reading the coverage as much as the quarterback is. So they need to know where to go. It's not just you're running this on this play. You're running this if he's here. You're running this if they're there. So that's just some things to keep in mind when thinking about the Jets wide receiver core.
I'm surprised you didn't ask Wave about it before, but Rashad Bateman, question mark.
I mean, he's got a role. I honestly think he's in the same vein of what we were just talking about. He's a solid wide receiver. He's not flashy. He's not great in any one area, but I do think he can be a good wide receiver. But as I just said, if I'm not high on Zay Flowers, who's far more talented than him, do I really want Bateman? And the other issue has been health. He just the guy can't stay healthy at all. But if you're late in your draft and you went running back early and went quarterback early and tight end early and you're starving for wide receivers, I think you could do worse. But I think that's pretty much it. One more guy, Jermaine Burton. I do think that, we've seen T. Higgins get hurt. We've seen Chase banged up from time to time and Chase with a holdout. Maybe there's some soft tissue injuries early in the season. I think Burton has a role there. Now, obviously, Yoshi's there, but I think Burton fills in better for these guys. And I do think that he has a little bit of upside too, especially if he's playing an every down role.
I think, like you said, though, it's more contingent upside. I don't know if you're going to get an every down role. It's more contingent on him being. I mean, listen, he was drafted to be T. Higgins' replacement next year. I think that's really his role. I don't see Burton playing much in the slot. I mean, they even have Trent Irwin still on the roster. So I think his path, and you might not even need to draft him because he'll probably end up on the waiver wire after the first couple of weeks as it is.
Use your fab, use your waiver when Chase or Higgins go down. Because that's what I was saying is one of them would have to go down for him to have an every down role.
Yeah, if you got if you've got a deep bench that you can stash in him, great. But I think like we talked about with a couple of these guys, best ball, nice play on DraftKings if the opportunity gets there. Redraft, it's tough to waste draft capital here.
Yep. But I think that's going to do it for this week. We have gone through the wide receivers. We have gone through the quarterbacks and tight ends. So check out that episode as well. But Dave, thanks for joining.
Can't wait to do running backs.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. Now that's even more of a shit show. Mike?
Yeah, running backs and Jets. We're getting there.
We are. It is approaching swiftly. But that's going to do it for this week. As always, check out thehelmsports.com. Really nothing up there right now in the My Bets tab. Haven't really seen any futures that really catch my eye, but might be something up there, so check it out. Obviously, I have The Helm Sports Substack. We'll have the newsletter out for all the Thursday night games and Sunday, so sign up for that. Get all the emails right to you. And check out, The Mad Lab MMA basically MMA. Mad Lab kills it. He is one of the best in UFC. We are going to break down all the DFS slates. We will basically go into our favorite plays, contrarian corner, all that good stuff. The Discord has every single sport you need, giving out picks over there. The second I make a bet, it is in the Discord, so check that out. And then also yardsperfantasy.com. Everything you need to get ready for your drafts is up there, so check that out. But that's going to do it. We're heading on to running backs this week, and check back later in the week. We will have a Jets season preview. But I am your host, Derek Helm. And remember,
Stefan out there.